session, which is entitled Where Next for Japan. Just to remind my distinguished panelists what we've sold you in this event, I'll just read through the précis that was printed by Reed. This seminar will concentrate on the extraordinary contribution that has been made by Japanese tourists over the last 50 years, highlighting the exceptional sophistication and insistence on quality. It will also look at how Europe might recover its former position. It will look at changes in demographics, Japanese consumer laws, and the place that Japanese clients occupy in the changing demand for Europe from throughout the world. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a very distinguished panel in front of you. I am Tom Jenkins. I'm the least distinguished member of the panel, I hasten to add. I'm the Chief Executive of the European Tour Operators Association, ETOA. On my far right-hand side, we have Keith Beecham, who's Director of Overseas Networks for Visit Britain. Keith has lived in Japan for over 10 years, or for well over 10 years, where he represented BTA in those days, I believe. He has a Japanese wife and is deeply interested in all aspects of Asian culture and commerce. Fenella Bishop, who's in the middle here, is president of Travcorp Asia, which incorporates Travel Corporation Japan. She also retains her connection with the Tracoin buying arm of Trafalgar, Insight, Contiki, and Uniworld. I think it is fair to say that under her stewardship, Tracoin became one of the most respected and in some ways feared purchasing teams in Europe. And it's a great honor to have Fenella here. And on my immediate right, we have Moshi Suwabe-san, who is Executive Director for International Affairs from JATA. He will be giving a short presentation on the Japanese market immediately after my short presentation. I hope we'll have a very productive conversation. My distinguished panelists, I would just stress, Suwabe-san has come all the way from Japan. Fenella has flown in especially from Geneva. Keith has come from Westminster Underground Railway Station. Which of you have had the most traumatic journey, I suppose, is open for debate later on. Ladies and gentlemen, your panel. Now, my role here is really just to set the scene very quickly. You'll be hearing very briefly from me. I just want you to give some core facts about Japan so you can keep them in your mind as we're discussing the Japanese market. The population is one of the biggest in the world. There's 127 million, the 10th largest population in the world. In 2010, the population of Japan was 120 million, so it's shrinking. By 2015, it's expected to be only 90 million. It is estimated that 40% of Japan's population will be of retirement age by 2060. This is an extraordinary demographic shift. It's also going to be an extreme concentration of wealth, I think, in the future. The economic indicators at the moment are looking good. Japan has got a GDP of $4.7 trillion, fifth largest economy on the globe. GDP per capita is $36,900, $37,000 a head. It's one of the richest economies, one of the largest and richest economies in the world. The growth rate, unusual when we're looking at it from the position of a slightly moribund Europe, is predicted to be 2% at the year. Unemployment rate is quite low, of 4.4%. Inflation is 0%, which in some ways is one of the problems of Japan. Its Gini coefficient, which is an indication of the comparative inequality in society, is 37.6. It's a pretty meaningless figure unless you know that America is roughly 50% Gini coefficient. So it's a comparatively unequal society in the United States. And somewhere like Scandinavia is roughly 22%. So in terms of the shape of society, it's somewhere between Scandinavia and America, if such a place exists, and if you can imagine it, it is Japan. Public debt, really just a background fact, 230% of GDP. It's a very big public debt, but uniquely in Japan, it's owned mainly by Japanese. They're not in hock to foreign lenders. Due to the country's aging population, the government needs to increase its income to fund rising welfare costs. This will be one of the things facing Japan in the forthcoming years. And in order to decrease the public debt, Japan's sales tax, currently 5%, is scheduled to increase to 8% in April 2014 and could further rise to 10% in 2015. What we're seeing, and I just want to leave this is my final slide, you'll be relieved to hear. What we're seeing at the moment is that a new Japanese consumer emerging into the market. And while the Japanese consumer used to be celebrated for the willingness to pay for quality and convenience, there now seems to be a shift towards affordable products and discount hunting. This is a sudden new development for those of us looking at Japan. The new Japan consumer has been characterized, and this is from McKinsey, as hunting for value, spending more time at home, and is health and environment conscious. And we've just written here, this fundamental shift in the attitudes and behavior of Japanese consumers seems likely to persist irrespective of any economic recovery. And what are the implications for the travel industry? Ladies and gentlemen, that's one of the things that we wish to explore while we're discussing this evening. It's my great honor to hand over to Sawabe-san, who's going to give you a more detailed introduction from the unique authority of JATA. Sawabe-san, please.
Thank you, Tom, and ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor and pleasure to meet all of you here and make a presentation about the Japan travel market and Team Europe. This photo is a little bit younger and 5 years younger than me, but this is true Hiroshi Sawabe. Today, I'd like to cover 5 topics. First one is about Japan Association Travel Agent. Second, the Japan Overseas Travel Market 2013, and partnership with UN WTO. Number 4 is today's highlight, Team Europe. And number 5 is Japan Tourism Expo Japan 2014. Japan Association of Travel Agents composed of 2,400 member companies, which is one of the largest travel associations in the world. Japan Association Travel Agent is called JATA in short. JATA is committed to the growth of the outbound, inbound, and domestic travel market through the collection and provision of information on travel operations and international exchanges, identifying issues, streamlining business operations, working to improve infrastructure, and eliminate barriers that discourage Japanese travel. And fields of activities and objectives of JATA are shown on this slide. Next, I'd like to touch upon a Japan Overseas Travel Market 2013, the current situation. With the influence of territorial issues with the neighboring countries, China and Korea, the number of Japanese overseas travelers fell below our expectation this year. However, we expect gradual recovery starting the end of 2013. And for the next 3 years, we prospect approximately 4 to 5% annual growth in number, reaching the 20 million Japanese overseas travelers in 2016, supported by the strategic economy initiatives of Prime Minister Abe. Our total number of Japanese overseas travelers for the first half of 2013 was down by 7.9%, over the same period of 2013. Over 2012. And this is because of the influence of political issues, as I mentioned. The number of Japanese travelers to China and Korea during the first half of 2013 was down by 25% over the same period of 2012. However, the number of Japanese travelers excluding those two countries first half of 2013 increased by 8.5% over the same period of 2012. It seems this situation will continue for a while. If we split the Japanese overseas travelers market into two, one for travel to China and Korea, the other for the rest of the countries, we will see the difference of future growth. We expect the larger growth in Japanese travel to South Asian countries during the next several years. However, how to maintain sustainable growth of leisure travel to Europe is a great challenge for us. This is the bar chart of the Japan inbound and outbound. Japan inbound has been increasing since 2011. This trend will continue until 2020, which is the year of Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics. This is the number of Japanese travelers by age in 2012. As shown on the bar graph, the core brackets of the Japanese overseas travel are of the 30s and 40s for male and 20s and 30s for female. As for the male core bracket of 40s, please note that majority of their travel is for business, not leisure. And this is Japanese population by age, 2005 and 2010, and 2015 and 2020. As for the leisure travel, the bracket of over age 60 is a golden mine. Share of the over 60s bracket will become 1/3 of the total Japanese population in the very near future. So there are still lots to do to be developed in the field of leisure travel. Unfortunately, their favorite sightseeing destination is Europe. As shown in the slide, the number of Japanese travelers to Europe is about 2.8 million in 2012. The record number is in the 2000, which is about 3.3 million. In other words, we are still a lot to do to revitalize Japanese travel to Europe in order to reach the level of year 2000. This is the chart of the number of air seats out of Japan to Europe. In 2012, we had a large growth, and that increase of the air seat has been adjusted in 2013. We're expecting the expansion of the air slots at 2 international airports in Tokyo 2014, and this will create positive influence for the increase of number of air seats between Japan and European major cities. Under these circumstances, using this slide, I would like you to understand what the year 2014 will be. Based on the analysis of travel trends and opportunity to support substantial increase, we prospect the number of Japanese overseas travelers to Europe in 2014 to increase approximately by 3 to 4% over 2013. And each factor is shown on the opportunity to support substantial increase in 2014. Next is about the partnership UNWTO. It is our great honor to have signed a comprehensive partnership with UN WTO in September 2013 in Tokyo. This UNWTO's partnership with JATA is the first ever in Asia and the Pacific, following the similar partnership with ITB in Berlin and WTM in London. JATA Tabihaku Travel Showcase has been conducted in 1977 as an internationally recognized leading travel event. This event has been both organizing an international conference and a travel showcase, especially highlighting promotion of Japanese outbound travel, which is unprecedented in the world. And we understand that this initiative of JATA has been regarded and praised by UNWTO as a two-way tourism promotion. Not only as JATA, but also as Japan, evaluating the tourism nation as a key strategic initiative, it is very significant that UNWTO recognizes JATA as one of the most important tourism organizations in Asia and the Pacific. And with this signing of partnership agreement, we JATA will deepen mutual collaborative relationships with UNWTO in the various fields of tourism. Next, I'd like to highlight Team Europe. Early 2011, ETC Japan chapter was disbanded. Since then, each European government tourism office has been promoting its destination individually toward the Japanese market, which is not the effective way. And the presence of Europe as a main leisure destination in the Japanese overseas travel market has started to weaken day by day. Under this circumstance, JATA appealed the necessity of organizing a Team European Tourism Group to European government tourism offices in Japan, tour operators, airlines, and hotels. And under the leadership of JATA, in November 2012, we successfully established Team Europe in order to revitalize the tourism promotion of Europe on a B2B2C basis. And the travel-related companies which sell tours to Europe, destination in Japan, agreed to join Team Europe and work together to create substantial demand for travel to Europe. As shown in the slide, this is a basic scheme of Team Europe composed of travel agencies, tour operators, and European tourist offices, and airlines, railways, and hotels and shops. This is a Trinity organization. And mission is to improve the ability of a travel company to Japan to plan and conduct tours to Europe and deliver information on the latest trends in travel to Europe as well as useful materials to the potential travelers in a timely manner, and tackle the factors inhibiting the tourism promotion in Japan. I have to explain about the factors inhibiting the tourism promotion. One of the greatest challenges is about reform of the current Travel Agency Act and standard travel business stipulation. This issue was discussed at the European Tourism Summit in Switzerland last month. We, the Japanese travel agencies, would like to work together to reform the current regulation of change and compensation and a cancellation period with tour operators in Europe. Any travel regulations have to be fitted to the global business standards and international business practices. And this is about a membership. And European national tourist offices airline and railway companies, hotel and facilities, and travel-related organizations and companies, and most important partner should be, the membership partner should be land operators. They know everything how to arrange the tours. And this is about action plan and a working group. There are so many opportunities for meetings to discuss regarding promotion. However, we do not need any meetings for the sake of meetings. After the meetings, we have to materialize to produce tours to Europe based on the idea at the meeting. To increase the number of tour products to Europe is a must work for Team Europe. Also, we have focused on exploring off-season opportunities. This is another key action plan of Team Europe. Everybody understands the seasonality. There are always peaks and valleys in tourism. And one of our common challenges is how we can cope with the valleys, which means how we can promote more travel during the slow season from the business viewpoint. In order to cope with the common challenges and develop tour productions, we have established working group composed of government tourism offices, airlines and hotels and travel agencies and tour operators. We, JATA, have been taking the leadership role since establishment of Team Europe. The key to success of this project is how Japanese travel companies will line up and work together, and how they can strengthen their business partnerships with the European travel partners. The following two slides shows the fruitful results of Team Europe's collaboration work in 2013. One of the greatest accomplishments this year of Team Europe is that we have built an information platform to place new European destination products and hot topics and share those information with Team Europe members and travel agency in Japan. And this is the second one. This slide shows Europe Square at this year's JATA Tabihaku Travel Showcase. This Europe Square was well received of the visitors of our event. Over 130,000 people visited this showcase and this Europe Square. Next, I'd like to touch upon a JATA Tourism Expo, which is a new word, must be, 2014. Formerly, it is called JATA Tabihaku Travel Showcase. I'd like to explain about the JATA Tabihaku Showcase, which is one of the largest tourism events with a goal to stimulate demand in tourism industry and has been conducted since 1977. This JATA event is an annual tourism event in Tokyo to B2B and B2C. UNWTO is one of our partners for this event. As I explained, we signed a comprehensive partnership agreement of UNWTO, which is the first ever in Asian Pacific. We'll expand its scale and chase higher quality. And from 2014, JATA Tabihaku Travel Showcase will be reborn as JATA Tourism Expo Japan. We'd like to welcome your attendance to the new JATA event in 2014. Thank you very much for hearing my presentation. During the last several years, we have experienced so many unfavorable events in our overseas travel, like the worldwide financial crisis, higher fuel surcharges, unexpected environment issues, etc. What we have learned from these events is that strengthening the business relations among our business partners crossing border is indeed of great importance. We are able to prepare for the future from the viewpoint of yield and risk management and materialize substantial tourism growth. And one of the action plan which I explained is establishment of Team Europe. I am very confident that we will be able to work together and grow together, tackling the common challenge in the travel industry. Thank you very much.
So, Aoi-san, thank you. That was a fantastically insightful introduction into the subject. Thank you very much. And we very much look forward to hearing more and working with you on Team Europe in the near future. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to get the panel working, so to speak, before we open up the floor to questions. And so, Keith, we hear in the question, the question posed in the précis that Rita published is how does Japan recover its former eminence in Europe, and what is the extraordinary contribution that's been made by Japanese tourists? I mean, are they still regarded as the gold standard amongst our guests here in Europe and indeed the UK?
Well, the simple answer is yes. A slightly more
I
complicated
want more,
or longer
please.
answer
Thank you.
is yes, I think so. I think there are a number of reasons why the travel industry as Europe are welcoming Japanese and would want to welcome larger numbers of Japanese. There is some seasonality from Japan. So Abe-san mentioned that there are efforts at JATA to improve that. We do get good numbers of Japanese traveling across the year, and some European countries have done great promotions. Germany's wrapped up the Christmas market, for example, in Japan. Santa Claus comes from Finland. So a number of countries have done very well to extend outside of those summer months. And so I think, first of all, recognizing that we do see Japanese traveling outside of just the core summer months. Japanese visitors, certainly as far as the UK is concerned, are way above the average spend of visitors from around the world. We get about £1,200 from a Japanese visitor in Britain. That's excluding their airfare. That's a lot more than the world average to Britain, which is about £700 to £800, and I'm sure that figure is similar across Europe. So they're a more valuable visitor to the source destination. A more emotional point about the Japanese market is I think that Japanese visitors are very respectful when they travel around the world, not only to Europe, but I see this when I lived in Asia, that they want to understand the host culture, and they want to respect that host culture in a way that some other nations find more difficult to do, shall we say. And so I think when you're receiving Japanese visitors, whether it's a hotel, a visitor attraction, on transportation, there is a great deal of respect which comes from, I think, within that Japanese psyche. I think as well, probably the last point, that Japanese visitors, in terms of, you mentioned this gold standard, have high demands on their expectations. You know, when they go to France or Italy, their expectations of the quality of cuisine, for example, is very high. When they come here to the UK, their expectation of our built heritage is very high, for example. So they demand very high standards. If, as source countries in Europe, we can meet those expectations that the Japanese have, I would argue that all other visitors from around the world will probably have their expectations met as well.
So Keith, I mean, on one level, I mean, you know, they're not as seasonal as other visitors. They spend more than other visitors. They seem to be more sophisticated and attractive than other visitors. What's not to like? What's going wrong?
Well, I think there are a number of things. I think there are some issues within the laws that surround the outbound market, and so Abe-san mentioned that. Vanessa might want to say something about that. I think she's much closer to that than I am. So I think there's some structural issues around that. There's a big change going on in the demographics, which you've seen, and I think perhaps we, as the receiving countries here in Europe, have been a bit slow to recognize those demographic shifts. We saw that, I think it was A third of all Japanese will be over 60 very, very soon. A lot of attention has been given to younger travellers from Japan. That used to be the so-called OL, office lady segment. People and countries and organisations are beginning to switch to the more elderly market, the Dankai market as they call it in Japan. And in a sense we're catching up as receivers of these visitors. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to target those more elderly visitors. But I'm always reminded by those organisations such as the youth hostels here in Europe that it doesn't matter. If you can get a young Japanese person to visit, you'll probably get them to come back to Europe 6 or 7 times across their life. So it's a balance. We can't put all of our eggs into this basket for the more elderly visitors. And then the show's about to start, I think, behind us. Can you hear the noise? Yeah, I've got to start dancing.
It's your warm-up band, Fenella. Fenella, I mean, come on. I'm just trying to think. I mean, we've heard from Sawabe-san that there were 3.3 million Japanese visitors coming to Europe in 2000. This has became 2.6 in 2012. 2.6 million.
2.8.
2.8 million. I do beg its pardon. Sorry, 2.8. My notes are entirely at fault. So we've seen a drop in 500,000. Not a dramatic drop, but at the same time, we've seen 15 million extra visitors a year come from Russia. We've seen 3 million visitors extra a year come from Canada, from China, from Mexico. And is it simply a question of Japan staying static whilst the other markets have been rushing into any gaps? Or is there something more sophisticated going on?
I'm going to leave the semantics of of sales in Japan to people who know more about it and speak more as the inbound operator that looks after Japanese business. And we deal with markets from all over the world, and I want to stress that some of the problems that face the Japanese market face all of our traditional markets like North America, etc. as well. Keith touched on, as did Sawabe-san, on the Japanese travel law. And this is, in fact, in the opinion of...
One moment. Technical hitch.
Sorry, I thought you were doing that.
European engineering, not Japanese engineering.
Or technically challenged person. Just goes to show how loud my voice is, because I didn't really need a microphone. So the Japanese travel law, in essence, it was originally brought in 1995 to protect the Japanese consumer, and I think has done an excellent job for a market where service is key. And whilst we all and everyone that is looking after the Japanese consumer coming into Europe is wanting to maintain that level of service and not in any way downgrade the experience when they come to Europe, we're in a different world today to 1995. The way that hoteliers sell today is completely different. And with the advent of the internet, .com companies and direct connectivity, the hotel supplier is essentially saying that it is no longer attractive to block space at low rates a year in advance, not know what's going on until 30 days prior to arrival, and then receiving a lot of cancellations. The travel law insists that a Japanese consumer does not have to pay 1 penny, in essence, until 30 days prior. And I was recently in Tokyo and actually hadn't realized that there is a trend today for the Japanese consumer to book 4 or 5 holidays and decide at 30 days prior which one to take, which means that a lot of Japanese companies are receiving mass cancellations at 30 days, which does not help the materialization. Today, the materialization rate from the Japanese market is lower than any other market. You can be looking as low as 20-25%. So for a hotelier who has the option of direct connectivity .com companies where they continue to control the space and are able to manipulate the price on a daily basis, you can imagine the challenge of the inbound operators who are trying desperately to secure the space that Japan wants with such a low materialization rate and the restriction of the number of hotels that can be used. Again, the Japanese travel law states that the Japanese agent has to feature the hotels in the brochure, so there are a limited number of properties that can be used. And finally, in the event that a hotel is overbooked and needs to book out, there are onerous penalties to be paid, which again do not exist in any other market. And we're talking, for example, 2% of the total cost of the holiday, including airfare. So there's been a general resistance in the last couple of years from hoteliers towards the Japanese market. And this is not helped by the fact that there are, of course, emerging markets such as China and South America. And we're seeing, particularly in certain cities such as London and Paris, not to mention places like Mont Saint-Michel and the Lake District, which are iconic for the Japanese market, and we have far fewer properties. We're seeing a situation where we can't supply as much space for the Japanese market as we would like to do.
Goodness, Fenna. I mean, just to summarize, so if I can think correctly, you're saying that the consumer laws are peculiarly draconian, by which I mean peculiarly strict, and that if there is a slight variation from what has been specified in the brochure, there is a penalty to be paid. And that this, combined with the comparatively low materialization rate, a low materialization rate which is driven by consumers' behavior to only confirm 30 days out, means that whilst what Keith is saying, that the Japanese consumer is one of the most prized consumers we can have in Europe, you're saying that from a hotel perspective, and we have one or two hotels in this room, I think. They may be hiding, but they're here. But from a hotel perspective, they're not as desirable as they should be, is the right way of phrasing it.
I think the consumer is very desirable and is often voted by hoteliers as being the most loved consumer for their charm, their behavior, their politeness, etc. There's no question. But in terms of the travel law and how that affects hoteliers financially, unfortunately, what you're saying is correct, and the Japanese market is no longer attractive.
So, Abe-san, I don't want to dwell on consumer law too much. We want to move on to other things. But I'm just very intrigued by what Vanilla was saying about this last-minute booking pattern of people choosing to provisionally book 5 holidays and then confirming one. Sounds quite a good idea if you're a consumer, but if you're an industry, I can imagine it's problematic for people in Europe. It must be very problematic for the Japanese industry, isn't it?
Before I speak about this issue, and I have to say, before I joined Ajata, I was head of the South Japan and Korea, so I know much about this kind of situation in Japan because I worked at Stout Hotels for 7 years. Yes, it's anyway. What I want to say is the Japan Travel Agency Act is introduced in 1990, and revised in 1990s, and in order to the first action is in order to protect the consumer. That is great, but the world has been changed, especially the tourism world has been changed year by year. So we're pushing the government to say, why don't you fit, or why don't you learn, and what the real international business transactions or business practice is. So this is why I accepted this invitation and speak with you and share the information. The current Japanese or overseas tourism situation is we need the voice. For example, out of the ETOA is the tour operators and the most influential tour, and we work together with ETOA and show what the reality is, what should be fitted, and how the current Japanese Travel Act is not fitted in the national standard way. So we know the act obstacles are right now, but we know how to cope with, but it's not one-time measure. So we'd like to drastically tackle with this issue, and of course we need your support, and especially working closely with ETOA, and at the end of the day, we'd like to reform it as soon as possible.
Cool. Now, we've been talking here. We've got some time for questions. Do we have any questions in the audience? We could carry on. We have a question in the front row. So can you say who you are when you ask your question?
My name is Rashad, and actually I've lived in Japan, so I'm very excited about this presentation. One of you mentioned that if you get a young Japanese person to visit, they'll visit Europe 6 or 7 times in their life. My question is, how do you get that young Japanese person to visit the first time?
Keith, I think it's a good question for you.
A very good question. I think you need to be a social anthropologist to give a proper answer to that question.
Do we have a social anthropologist in the house,
Yeah.
out of interest?
There's a lot going on in Japan. Young Japanese people are not taking up the roles prescribed for them by their elders, and there's a lot of different behavior that this younger generation is showing. It's a more, I think, an inward-looking generation than the generations above them. My Japanese family, we have several people who fit this category of young people, and anecdotally, when I talk to them, there isn't a big appetite for understanding the international world. There isn't the global mindset that 10 to 20 years ago I think I would have experienced in Japan. The Sotsugo Rokyo market, which is I think the school excursion market, used to be really very, very big in Japan in the 90s. That's much smaller as a way of getting young people to travel overseas. To have, we call it a gap year here in Britain. They would have a sort of a gap term. A lot less of that is happening, although I understand some of the Japanese universities are realigning their academic years to make that easier, so perhaps that's a good thing. So I think there's a really kind of big social issue around the appetite of young people for all of that. So having said all of that, that's quite negative. On the more positive side, we've got low-cost carriers now penetrating that Japanese market, giving young Japanese people and others opportunities to travel around Asia, of course, initially, but allowing them to experience travel more cheaply than perhaps in the past. That's good for Europe, because if people start traveling short haul, I'm pretty confident from all the research I've ever seen, is that they build an appetite then to go further and further afield. I think Europe plays to its strengths, which are essentially culture, tradition, and countryside to some extent. And we've got to continue as tourist boards, working in partnerships with the various commercial organizations to explain why Europe is an exciting place for these younger people to come and see. I would argue that London is the most exciting city on planet Earth. Of course I would say that, working for Visit Britain. And the evidence suggests that when young Japanese people come here and they have a fantastic kind of multicultural experience, but at the same time they can have their quintessentially afternoon tea, go to the Lake District, see Peter Rabbit and all that sort of stuff. So it's about positioning Europe's story in an exciting way for these young people, and I think the Europe program that JATA is leading on is a very positive step to bring together the different players here in Europe, so that we can share the resources and share the programs to build new products, to build new destinations for the younger Japanese, but also for the family segment and then the elderly segment as well. So there's opportunity everywhere with the right amount of focus, I think.
Fernando, you think you're floating a Kontiki version for Japan?
Well, actually, Kontiki is successful in Japan, comparatively speaking. I mean, selling a seat-on coach English-speaking product in Japan is quite innovative, really. But we get in excess of 800 passengers a year. And I'd just like to say, because following Lucerne, I was quite disheartened to learn that the youth market was travelling less. But in Tokyo, I read in the newspapers that the government are now putting certain financial incentives in place for youth to follow the Western system of taking a gap year and travelling more, and trying to encourage the youth to travel.
We may have other questions out here. So, there's a gentleman in the front.
Austin.
Hello. Hello, my name's Richard. I'm speaking now as a hotel supplier, but I was before for some years, many years, a buyer as well. So I know that the challenges we're talking about are not exclusive to hoteliers. The Japanese law, consumer law itself, I think many people are coming to the conclusion that is part of the overall sort of problem. But regarding how do we better materialize the Japanese guests that come, it seems that in recent years the conditions of tour series have become stricter, if anything. More must requests, more impositions of pre-booking on all dates, etc., which is causing, of course, enormous issues further down the line, and not always seems to be linked to better sales. So I wonder how you think that we can, leaving the consumer law to one side, how can we attack the problem of materializing better and addressing that issue, but still not sort of compromising on the sales quality and the issues that we have to leave as they are?
One of the best way to cope with that issue is to produce attractive package tour. That's the best solution, I think. Which means nobody wants to cancel that last minute, because once they cancel, there is no way to rebook. So we have to create such kind of situations.
Okay, we got hands flying up everywhere. The lady in the front row. I'm also conscious we've got 10 minutes, so we had 7 hands shoot up there, so I think we...
Hi, I'm Jo Lloyd from Birmingham Airport. I just wanted to say thank you to Suabe-san for your European initiative. It's very interesting for an airport like Birmingham, which has invested massively in facilities and would very much like to break into some of the new markets for Birmingham. And I'm just interested, we very much embrace the partnership approach. We would like to work with Japanese travel agents, indeed with partners here in the UK. And have you had much interest from new partners? Clearly, hotels that have always worked in your industry will be interested, those players that have always been involved. But I'm sure it must be interesting to look at new partners like Birmingham Airport, to look at new opportunities.
I think Birmingham is exceptional. I think it's one of the most great gateway to explore new UK, I think, as I explained to you yesterday. And I have to say, we are private sectors, organizations. And we always try to think this business from the business viewpoint. We like to expand the current business. In other words, this is a world of competitions. In a tourism way, I have to say this is a world of destination competitions. But great things for you folks is UK is one of the best choice for Japanese general consumer. But however, and also Europe is repeat destinations. But consumer is very much demanding. They're always looking for something new. So we are very much appreciated, welcome for the great suggestion or a new tour product suggestions and proposal and idea, just like your airport, your destinations, your city has great potential to be developed in the current Japanese market. And please knock the door of JATA. We're more than happy to introduce to leading wholesalers and travel agents.
A question in the front.
Hello. My name is Angela. I work for ANA Sales. I want to get back to Richard's question concerning the cancellation, low materialization, etc. from Japan. I think one of the problems is that the tour operators in Japan, a lot of the young staff, and I can see it in my own company, they're not really well trained. I mean, they don't really know much about Europe. And even though they attend JATA and the various workshops, the problem is they don't really understand how hotel suppliers or coach suppliers or restaurants work in Europe. And so they believe that if they book departures every day in their tour series, they at least have one materialized, but they don't realize the chaos that it causes with a huge amount of cancellations, because all these companies across Japan, that's how they work. And I think JATA is a association covering all of Japan. I think through your organisation, it would be good to have some sort of training courses for these young planning staff, you know, to try and get them to be educated on how the European supplier works. I think that's one of the big problems, why we've got such a high ratio of cancellations. So I think, yeah,
Do you want to answer that while he's down?
It's a big problem, that's why I'm here, and we're working hard.
Thank you for drawing it to our attention. There's a question from a gentleman in the middle who's waving his hand and stroking his chin. There we are.
Thank you. My name's Adam. I'm director of Mickey Travel. And just going back really to what Angela and Richard have said, but from my point of view, I think it's the fact that there's no commitment, there's no need for a commitment from the customer. To me, that's the basic problem. In most cases, when you want to go and buy a car, you have to pay a deposit. When you go and book a holiday, you have to pay a deposit. And the fact that even if the product is more attractive, then they'll still book 4 or 5 attractive products. I think until the customer has to put down some money at an earlier stage, then I think we're going to still face the same problem.
Yeah, and if I could just add, if you look at the American market, Australian market, any other market, you look at Trafalgar, for example, it's a $250 non-refundable deposit. We don't want a client shopping around and booking 5 or 6 holidays. We want to offer them a fantastic experience for them to make up their mind and to commit. So we're certainly not recommending that we would go from absolutely nothing to $250, but perhaps if we introduced $100 per person deposit in Japan, the client can take out insurance in the event that there is illness and they're unable to travel. But it would focus the mind on booking one holiday and enable the Japanese agents to better manage their departures.
I think what you're saying, I'm just tracing it in my head because I'm very slow, but what you're saying is that we're competing for space against those markets who are prepared to put deposits up front.
Yes.
And that because, speaking as a notional Japanese operator, I'm wanting to buy hotel rooms and I don't have any money to guarantee my pledge, it's very difficult for me to secure those hotel rooms. And because I find it difficult to secure those hotel rooms, then the penalties that cut in thereafter become all the more difficult. I don't want to spend too much time on this. Has anybody got a question not related to Japanese law? A gentleman in the front.
Hey.
Just speak loud. Do you have any sense of... Hi, this is Tim from ETOA. I wonder if the panel has any sense of whether the online market is developing in Japan. You know, what proportion of business coming to Europe sort of books through traditional channels, and what proportion might book directly or put things together independently online? Are things changing in that area?
Keith, have you done?
We've done some analysis and some research, and in fact it's one of those very few offices around the world where we have our own online staff, which sort of hints towards the answer I'm about to give. Domestic travel and tourism in Japan is online generally, so it's not as if Japanese visitors are unprepared, unwilling, culturally against booking online. They do it, and therefore I think there's an expectation that we'll see increasingly more online booking going overseas. Certainly as far as mobile as well as PC devices, there's an awful lot of planning and thinking that goes on online, and we see that as far as our own website is concerned with those Japanese markets. I think, however, at the moment, they're still, given that this is quite an expensive product, a trip to Europe, there is a reassurance message which is hard to give to visitors online. It's easier when you walk into JTB or Anna Hello World or Hankyu or whoever it might be, JTB, in Tokyo, in one of those cities, to sit down and talk to one of these staff. Whether they're well educated and well trained is another issue. So I still think it's going through the more traditional routes, but it's changing. And I talked to some of the airlines, the British Airways, the Virgins, and yes, they get bookings direct to their sites, and year on year they're seeing very significant growth. But it's still, by, I guess, international standards, still quite modest. And all of the major tour operators, and I'm sure Sawabi-san knows much, much better than I do, they've all got online offerings as well as offline offerings.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid we've now run out of time. It just falls to me just to stress that we've dwelt a little bit on the consumer laws. I just want to stress that all consumer laws, irrespective of where they're passed, come at a price. And that price is always borne by the consumer. It is never borne by the supplier or the tour operator. The cost is always passed on to the consumer. And so calibrating the consumer law against the changing marketplace is one of the biggest challenges facing legislatures throughout the world. And we are facing a changing marketplace. So Europe is having to look at their travel laws. Whether they're doing it correctly at the moment is open to question, but they are looking at them. And I think Japan undoubtedly will be doing so. I don't want to leave it on consumer laws. I just want to stress that from our point of view, all markets are important. New markets are particularly welcome, but old friends are to be cherished, because you cannot have new old friends. And Japan is an old friend of Europe now, and it is a market which we value. And I think this seminar is a testimony to the value that we place on that market, and we are delighted that JATA have joined us in an expression of that mutual admiration. So ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking Keith Beecham, Hiroshi Sawabi, and Fenella Bishop, and thank you very much for coming.
Well said, Tom.